Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Wednesday, March the 20th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined as always by producer JT. JT, how are you?
I'm good, if not, what now, 45 minutes late to the
Is
show
that how late
now?
we are?
Yeah, and
Is that your
it's
fault?
like it was going to be my fault, I thought, because I had a doctor's appointment that was from 3:30 to 4. Thought I could get home in 30 minutes. Turns out
Mhm,
it took me about 40 minutes to get home. I
mhm.
sit down at
So you were late to the show,
4:45,
is what I'm
15
hearing.
minutes.
So you're late to the show. That's okay. It happens.
Where were the next 30 minutes? That's what I want to know. That's
There's a
what I'm
missing
over
30
here sitting.
minutes.
That's what I'm sitting down at my computer wondering. But
You ever had an all-time bad time management day where you don't know what you're thinking and just the time got away from
average
you?
Easton freeze day, you
That's
mean?
that was me today. Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's where we're at. But we're gonna dive right in today. We've got a lot to talk about. We're gonna be covering some Calvin Ridley. We're gonna be covering some plans for the Titans on defense in 2024. What comes next for Rand Carthon and company, and then a big news with producer JT segment to cover all of the things that have been going on in the NFL in the past. How long has it been? 5 days since I've spoken to you guys on this feed. So let's dive right in to some Calvin Ridley talk. And we wanted to recap just a couple of things that he spoke about and things that we talked about online on Friday when he had his introductory press conference with the Titans. I was there in attendance. Really, really charismatic guy. For all of the lack of energy and charisma that you may have experienced on Thursday's introductory press conference when we met Wood Cushenberry and Kenneth Murray and Tony Pollard and Cheeto Awuzie. That was all made up for on Friday by Calvin Ridley, who is a very outgoing guy, very well-spoken guy, very honest guy. I can already tell that I'm going to have a lot of fun talking to him this year and getting quotes from him. And he's going to be a friend of ours in the media. I'm sure of that. But he was talking about a lot of things, including his season last year with the Jaguars. Of course, his first and only year with the Jaguars, coming off of like a year and 3/4, roughly 2 years out of the NFL. He first stepped away. If folks for some reason aren't privy to this at this point, he first stepped away from the league for mental health reasons, and then the league got him for gambling. And he had a really funny moment in the press conference where he was talking about that suspension, which was ultimately 1 year long, and how he felt like if the folks at the NFL who handed down that punishment had just spoken to him, heard out the circumstances, they may have given him something more like 6 months and understood the situation. He didn't go into details of what the situation exactly was, but he accidentally at one point said, I think they would have realized that the guy wasn't cheating. Actually, no, the guy was gambling. Yeah, the guy was gambling. He wanted to claim that he wasn't gambling. He was, in fact, gambling, and he admits that fully, but he no longer is gambling on sports books. He is, in fact, gambling on himself. And with the Jaguars last year, he spoke about that season like a lot of folks in the media and a lot of fans seem to perceive that season that he had in 2023, which was underwhelming. I think a big part of that narrative comes from the fact that he was a very hot commodity in folks' fantasy leagues. And there's always a fantasy versus reality situation with big name offensive weapons, where they may actually have a very solid year considering the circumstances of where they were. But if they didn't put up, the expected fantasy points each week, then folks that are into football and into fantasy think the guy's a bum. He had a down year. And I kind of feel like that might be the case with Ridley last year, JT. He spoke about it like we seem to speak about it, where it's like, yeah, I feel like I left a lot out there. I feel like I could have done better. He kept talking about how, it was my first year back in essentially 2 seasons, shaking off a lot of rust, relearning the game, all of these things. But then you look at the numbers, he had 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. He had a better year than DeAndre Hopkins had last year. And everyone considers DeAndre Hopkins to be one of, if not the only shining light of the Titans offense last year, the only thing to write home about. Calvin Ridley did better than that last year with the Jaguars. And so I just think it's interesting, this idea that if last year was not him living up to his potential, which I'm not saying I don't think it was. I do think he can be a better player than that. And yet it was 1,000-yard, 8 touchdown season. If he's got that next gear in him, then pairing him with a DeAndre Hopkins, who is on the older side like Ridley is, but both are coming off of years where they don't seem to be slowing down in any capacity, it could be a really serious problem to have both of those guys on the field at the same time for opposing defenses.
I mean, not just that, but if he had a season after not playing for 2 years, if he has a season like that, and then as we keep kind of coming back to on a lot of these shows here on the 440 Podcast Network, the way he was potentially misused in that Jaguars offense and his success rate, despite being poorly used in that offense with Trevor Lawrence, it's really easy to see that. I think that he really can be that number one that the Titans are desperately looking for. And the fact that he is a little bit younger than DeAndre Hopkins, and how much of that really matters that he is 29 going on 30, despite not playing for 2 years.
Oh, no, my friend. Really he is 25 going on 26. The body. Haven't you heard?
Exactly.
Haven't you heard?
We heard on Friday. That was for sure.
Well, two things. One, I'm glad that you bring up the misusage thing. You can bet that the number one thing I have written down on my list of questions to ask new Titans offensive coordinator Nick Holtz next time we see him is, hey, what do you think about this idea that Calvin Ridley wasn't, he was with Jacksonville like Calvin was last year. One could assume him being on the Titans staff probably had a lot to do with Calvin coming to Tennessee in free agency in the first place. They're not going to go and spend what they did on Calvin if a Nick Holtz, who was just with him in a serious capacity in Jacksonville, isn't banging the table in Tennessee like, yes, get this guy. It's going to work for our system. It's going to be worth the money you're going to spend on him. And so Nick Holtz is a guy that I'd imagine has some thoughts on whether or not he was utilized properly or not. Now, please speak, because I'm about to cough and I can't stop.
Well, yeah, we can talk about not only the misuse, but like what you were getting into there, how much of that really, where the tread on the tires, how much of it is truly still there, as he said in the press conference on Friday, that he felt like he may be 29, but he feels 25, which is a quote for the history books there. It's an all-timer in a press conference, I really feel like. Calvin Ridley saying that he definitely is 4 years younger than he actually is totally not true, but I really respect the diva, wide receiver mentality to believe that fully.
No, he was real for that. He said, yeah, I'm 29 on paper, but I'm really 25 in real life, which I am so sorry, guys, if I cough a lot in this episode. Have you ever had a cold and you get over it in like 3 or 4 days? Shut up. You get over it in like 3 or 4 days, and then the cough sticks around for a week, and then 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and it just never goes away. That's me right now. So having a lot of fun with that. Going to try to not cough at you all day. But yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm 25 in real life. You're going to see a big part of that was having those 2 years off, but I'm 25 in real life. And then we had a lot of folks meme that on the internet, saying like, me when I'm getting kicked off my parents' insurance, me after taking a gap year in college, or when I'm a 5th-year senior trying to explain to the freshman girls at the bar like why I'm not this old man that's creeping around the college bars. A girl desperately trying to stay with Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm 25, I promise. I'm not going to turn 30. I think everybody that is about to hit their 30s can relate to that one a little bit. One last thing is Calvin Ridley's number, the actual amount of money being spent on him by the Tennessee Titans. His new, JT, just handle this real quick for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we'll move on from Calvin Ridley with real quick going into this here with his contract numbers. I think that's the big sticking point, and that was a big narrative with how big of the contract it was. I mean, $50 million about guaranteed over 4 years, $23 million APY makes him the 10th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL today. However, and like a lot of us alluded to on Twitter the past couple of days, it's just another cog in the ever-evolving machine that is the next wide receiver getting even more money than the last. And so when you look at the list of guys who are going to get paid within the next year or two, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Nico Collins, and T. Higgins, you can guarantee
Devonta Smith, that list, by the way, I forgot him as well.
Devonta Smith as well. You can pretty much accurately say that Calvin Ridley's not going to be this guy whose contract looks like a crazy amount of money come maybe a year or two.
I mean, we've already got Jerry Jeudy making it look somewhat more palatable than it was, which we'll get to that later. I don't know what the Browns are doing. Again, thank you, JT, for probably not the last time taking over in the middle of the episode. I'm going to try to breathe the whole time, but it's going to be a struggle. Clearly, I thought I could do this. We'll see if I can finish. All right, so that's all we have on Calvin Ridley. I think that point, which you did a good job of taking over for me there, this idea that, hey, 23 a year right now seems like a lot of money. He's that makes him the 9th or 10th highest paid APY in the league. 10th highest. I wrote it myself. Good job, Easton. But that I'd imagine turns into like closer to the 20th within the next year. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, at least if you look at the list again, there are 5 guys I think get more money than Calvin Ridley for sure.
Okay.
Justin Jefferson, I think so. Jamar Chase, I think so. CD Lamb, yes. Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then so 4 guys, and then there's a couple that can make the case. Brandon Ayuk, I think most likely will bang the table for that. I think he'll be maybe 5. T. Higgins, you never know. I expect him probably to get around the same money as a Calvin Ridley, most likely. And then Jalen Waddle and Nico Collins, 2 guys who are maybe a little bit more down the track who could get contracts. But by then, I'm pretty sure the market will already shifted past Calvin Ridley's number,
right?
Especially when you look at the guys who are coming into the league this year. I mean,
well, that and the inflation of the cap. I mean, the number
Yep.
going up, how not just linearly, like exponentially every single year. It's a big deal, and the money has to go somewhere, right? So everybody's money is going to get bigger and bigger. Hey, if you're with us live today and you're suffering through me coughing at you like I am, which I apologize for again, we appreciate you being here. And we would love for you to join us on YouTube if you're not doing that already. Probably Sports Media's YouTube page is Probably Sports Media on YouTube. Find this live stream there. And that's where you can be a part of today's conversation in the comments. Like so many of you are, and you can't make me laugh and cough. I'm going to die. Derek saying getting sick was so 2020. Get with the times, Easton. Perfectly fair. We also have a little bit of a change of format. JT has done a good job of trying to spruce the place up. It's spring. It's time for a little spring cleaning here on the Hot Read podcast. So we've got some topic monikers for you. And so we're going to be dealing with those today. Hopefully the show looks better than it sounds today. Again, I am so sorry. And if you want to subscribe to this terrible program, we would appreciate that. Not a good day to ask you to subscribe because it's not a good show so far because I can't breathe. But we'll try to mail it in or not mail it in. Opposite of that. Try not to mail it in and power through here to the rest of the show. Okay. Let's take a deep breath and get on to what the Titans need to do on defense. You could argue the Titans' defensive plans are as poor as Easton's for the rest of this episode because they've got a lot of needs, a lot of holes currently on the roster. JT, we've got this graphic pulled up. Would you mind informing the folks as to the really, really deep and super secure and not at all an issue defense the Titans are currently rolling with into 2024?
Yeah, and so with the free agency plays that and signings they've done already, you can see how aggressive they've gone on the offensive side of the ball, and you could see, wow, this new offensive look and scheme is going to do wonders, and they're going to change dramatically overnight. Can't be said for the defensive side of the ball. We can really start to see this kind of take shape and see how many real problems and holes they still have on the defensive side of the ball. We can start up front with the front line here. So when you look at the edge guys that you have currently, you have Harold Landry, Arden Key, and Rashad Weaver. Now, those are 2 guys. Obviously, Arden Key and Harold Landry like to play on the same side of the ball a lot. So you would think that you really do need another edge rusher on the other side to play a lot of really good minutes and snaps every single game. I don't think Rashad Weaver can really do that realistically. And then
he can, you just don't want him to.
You
right?
don't want him to, right?
Landry's the only edge on this team currently who you want to be a close to every down snap guy, 3 down edge rusher. We saw it last year. Key is a talented guy. Don't get me wrong. But he's just not really an every down guy. He's much, I think his ceiling is utilized when you are using him as a rotational piece. And that's fine. Like there are really, really high-end rotational pieces in the NFL. We're going to talk about one that the Titans added today that I view kind of in the same vein as Arden Key. I think it's going to be very valuable to them, but you got to use them in the right circumstances.
Yeah, so obviously there are still holes to be filled on the edge there. And then you look inside and there are even more holes to still fill in here. As you look at the guys who are inside today, you have Jeffrey Simmons, you have maybe Keandre Coburn, who was a cut from the Kansas City Chiefs practice squad last year that is still finding his way on the roster here. And then you
who
have
else?
Today's signing here, Sebastian Joseph Day,
True.
which they just signed today.
Okay, then who else?
that's really it right now. They've
That's the end of
lost
the
a
list.
lot on the interior side of the line, a place where the Titans used to be so deep and
Yeah,
so good. And
yeah.
that's a really big problem when your best kind of position where you have kind of won in the trenches the past couple of years, and
Mhm.
that's your call sign. When you see that you're not retaining a lot of these guys, you have to think that's a problem, or it's interesting to see what their plan truly is currently with the front seven on the line here.
Yeah, I mean, no more Denico Autry, no more Tier Tart. You've gotten down to, again, Andre Coburn and Jeffrey Simmons, who's a blue chip A+ player, but it can't just be him, right? And so
Now, the biggest
that
thing I think with the signing today, if we want to talk about that real quick, because with that one, I think it's pretty important there. Sebastian Joseph Day, I think
right.
it's pretty important to note that he signed this contract with the Los Angeles Chargers here, I believe 2 years ago, and
Mhm.
wasn't all that he was cut out to be. I mean, I think over the
It
last
was a
in his
mega deal. It was a
entire
huge contract.
it was a big contract for him, and he has not produced. I think in his career so far, he has 11 total sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and about 30-ish, 31 quarterback hits in his entire career here. But something that's really interesting is that what got him that contract with the Los Angeles Chargers was playing alongside Aaron Donald with the
Mhm.
Rams before that. So you have to think that maybe if you put him in this situation where he can play alongside Jeffrey Simmons and kind of get that same he kind of gets that same role there where he doesn't have to be the guy all the time, and he has a guy who's better than him and has that star caliber defensive tackle play in Jeffrey Simmons. You have to think that maybe you can get something out of him and you can get back to that production that he was able to do, because he's not the main guy, but he can produce in the aggregate there.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's not unrealistic to hope that having him paired up with a guy that is a blue chip, do everything player on the inside, like Jeffrey Simmons is going to set him up to be his best possible self. And Stoney with the Sobros Network in the comments, how dare we question the Titans' plan on defense today, JT? I mean, what are we thinking?
I mean, it's tough. I think if you look at it to some fans, that we should really give all these young guys a shot that have been on this team for 3 or 4 years and have proven time and time again that they are just depth pieces. Like it's a little mind
Right.
boggling, but yeah, they do need a lot of help. And then Kenneth brings up an interesting point here. Tavondre Sweat at 38, big dude who's fast, really can win on the inside. It would be pretty scary to see a guy like Sweat and Simmons in on the same line there.
Yeah, on one hand, I'm not sure that's the best utilization of their draft capital. On the other hand, they're getting to a point where they're forcing our hand and saying, yeah, maybe they have to, maybe they need to. Let's talk about some of these positions in particular. Actually, the rest of we haven't even talked about the secondary. Let's run through real quick who they have in the secondary. It's not as dire, I guess, at the safety position, and the linebacker position is, though. At safety, you got Amani Hooker, good, solid. You don't really have a running mate for him as far as a top line starter. You got Elijah Molden, who played more safety than cornerback last year and is kind of transitioning into that role. He's fine. Again, more of a rotational depth piece. So you need another depth guy and you need another starter up there. And so far, it's like people are still kind of hoping Justin Simmons, the former Broncos safety who's on the free agent market.
I believe Marcus
is
May is still visiting with the team.
right. Those two guys, and if those bust out, then like I really don't know what the plan is. Take a peek at this draft class and get back to me if you think that that's the area they should go in. And the same applies for linebacker, right? Middle linebacker. You've got Kenneth Murray, who you just paid, who's not even that great of a linebacker. You're just hoping you can get the most out of him. Former first round pick, really athletic, all these things. So you can start, but he's not a green dot guy. He's not the guy that you want to be the quarterback of your defense. You got Jack Gibbons, Dr. Gibby, anybody? Dr. Gibby, anybody? Right now, it's Kenneth Murray and Dr. Gibby running out of that tunnel doing the solo introductions on Sundays for the defense. Like that's who it is. And then Otis Reese, who has been talked about for like a year as a guy that the Titans coaching staff is really high on, but we haven't really seen a whole lot of him. And like what they're high on, we're not sure because we've not seen it in practice either. Yes, there's some positive things, and the guy can trigger downhill and talented athlete, but I don't know about being a starting linebacker. And so they really need help there. At the cornerback position, though, that's where things aren't as bad, right? You got Awuzie, who you just added. He's a bona fide starter. You've got Roger McCreary, who's a bona fide starter, already on the roster. And then you're really missing one other outside corner, in my opinion. We've seen McCreary be able to do it on the outside if need be, but he's best utilized on the inside. And then it's depth, right? It's Eric Guerra. It's Caleb Farley, year 4 Caleb Farley. Interest anybody? And then Trey Avery, who we've seen that song and dance. And so, like, they need to draft a guy, or we'll talk a little bit later about how they may still be in on a big trade option in the offseason that is already a veteran player, and that certainly would fix that hole. You just have to really pony up for it. So all of that being said, they need help everywhere on defense, and they got some big holes to fill. Let's talk about some of these specific positions, though. We were talking earlier today, JT, about how the linebacker and safety positions in general in the NFL maybe kind of at a over devalued standpoint, if that makes any sense. Can you elaborate on where that conversation went? You and I and Stoney and Zach were having this conversation earlier today, and I think it's a valuable one to have.
Yeah, I mean, the basic gist of it was at some point when you are kind of allocating your resources to other positions of need, devaluing it too much means that you have to value it more at some point. And so when
All right,
when you're able to well, I mean, it's kind of the point of it all. It sounds ridiculous, but there's a point where you are putting so much capital into premium positions that at some point you're going to have to pay the price and maybe have to pony up a little bit too much to pay these guys at a couple positions, because at the end of the day, you can have so many great starters at corner and up on the front seven and on the offensive line and the wide receiver position. But if you don't have those key positions like safety and the interior of the defensive line and your middle linebackers patrolling the field, like Easton or Kenneth says here, he says you may be headed straight back to the 2020 offense and 2020 defense, where you may be putting up a bunch of points, but because you still have gaping holes in your safety and linebacker play, you're going to get gashed for 40 to 50 points a game, maybe, with how they're kind of constructed right now, which is maybe the plan that they're going for. I mean, just trying to figure out the offense because 2025 is on their minds, and we'll fix the defense down the road. But it is a risky game to play.
Well, and that's the point right there, right? This idea that opposing offensive coordinators aren't going to target your obvious needs on defense just because the position that you're, really lacking at isn't a premium one. This idea that, well, if you got good corners and you got a good pass rush, then you don't, like, it's fine if you have deficiencies elsewhere. In general, like, if you have to have deficiencies, that's where you want them. Yes. But that idea has officially jumped the shark in many people's minds. This idea that, if you've got good corners and you've got good pass rush, man, we can plant a lawn chair out there at middle linebacker. We can have a couple of scarecrows playing safety. No, you can't.
I mean, at you. The greatest example is last year's Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they literally, for better or for worse, put lawn chairs and deck furniture out there at the linebacker position.
Did you guys watch that San Francisco game in primetime? I watched that San Francisco game in primetime.
They put that out there, and then they overpaid for an aging Kevin Byard, and it still didn't work out for them. So, I mean, it is a way you can build your team, and you can have success if you have your quarterback go on a run like Jalen Hurts did. But like we saw last year, their defense is what killed them in a lot of those games, and you can see that. Like, to your point, I just thought of that off the top of my head. There's no better example than that Eagles defense last year, who had deficiencies at those exact positions.
And so in general, the point I guess we're trying to get to in a roundabout way is, if you're like Jack Gibbons, starting linebacker, cool by me, because guess what? Linebacker doesn't really care anymore. It's devalued by the league. Man, you need to reassess, I think. That's just not that's not going to work out well for you, I promise. And so I want to talk about two guys the Titans were in on kicking the tires on, at least, and then ultimately did not land in free agency the past couple of days. The first being Jerome Baker, former Dolphins linebacker who was a free agent, a target of the Titans, met with the Titans last week. I don't remember what exactly today was, but a couple of days ago. And then the Titans let him out of the building He went to Seattle to visit with them, and he did not leave Seattle. He ended up signing with the Seahawks on a 1-year, $7 million contract. And that led me to just start to wonder, really, for the first time, what exactly is their plan at linebacker in 2024? They had good options on the market. They had ample money, and they sure as heck had the need. They had all three bits of the recipe for what you need in order to go after a guy, and they sat on their hands. They've not made a decision. Now, I'm not saying that free agency is over. I'm not saying that they have chosen not to address the need. I'm just saying so far they haven't, and it's getting confusing. And I cannot believe how much flack I have gotten for merely questioning what the Titans' plan is at linebacker in 2024. Looking forward to like mid-October at this point, where it's going to be a big fat problem for the Titans, and they're getting killed. And, tight ends are massive. Like, Evan Ingram is going for 11 catches, 170 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And it's like, who is covering him? Oh, it's Jack Gibbons all day. What? And folks are going to say, what were the Titans thinking, letting this guy right? It's what I'm saying now. It's March. It's a problem now. It's going to be a problem then if they don't address it. And I think our buddy Zach put it the best. Football and Other F Words is his F Words pod as the Twitter handle. He said, for me, it's not about the specific position for the Titans. It's about maximizing roster construction, ignoring a deep quality market at any position of need when the same position is bottom of the barrel in the draft, which is the case with safety and linebacker. It makes no sense, especially if you decide money on one of the worst, you decide to spend money on one of the worst options at that group right out of the gate, like the Titans did, frankly, with Kenneth Murray. They had the means, they had the need, they had the options, and right now they're staring at Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons running out of the tunnel on Sundays. And I feel like I'm the crazy one for merely asking what the thought process is here, JT.
The only logical thought process I can think of for this one is that you have to think that if this is the direction they're going, man, I guess Rand Carthen sees something in these later rounds of the draft that he can kind of use his late round magic to get some absolute value on some guys. And I think that's going to be the case, that we're going to finally get to see Rand cook in the back half of the draft here, because it certainly sounds like they have found some guys that they're targeting in the back half of this draft here. And that's where they're going to use some of that capital, because if they're not going to sign any of these guys, you got to think that they're going to address it through the draft.
And so here's the other guy the Titans had a chance on, and they ultimately did not decide to sign with. And there are some extenuating circumstances here, but I want to talk about it because I am generally upset with the way that people have been addressing this online. Chase Young, former Washington Commander, and then last year traded to the 49ers, and now was a free agent, now has signed with the Saints on a 1-year, $13 million contract. We didn't know until today that he has a neck issue, getting surgery for it, going to miss training camp. Doctors say he's going to be available for the beginning of the season. So that's part of it. And I heard yesterday that the primary reason why most teams were hesitant to give him a deal was the medicals for him, and we didn't know what that was until today. But in general, I was very in on the Titans taking a chance on this guy. He a former defensive player of the year, number 2 overall pick, incredible athlete. There really is no more of a textbook example of a buy low guy when you're going to get him on a 1-year prove it deal like that, like the Saints have. Now, folks pushed back hard on this idea that whoa, $13 million on this guy who you don't even know if he wants to be out there sometimes, and you don't even know if he's gonna be a cancer in the locker room. I want to address all of this, okay? I think folks are way overdoing one viral clip from the playoffs. Everyone has seen it where the run defense is bad. He's taking the play off. He's walking around. He's not running. Like, it's a bad look. He is not putting forth effort on this play. It was one play, and it folks think that is representative of who he is as a player. Players take some plays off. I'm here to tell you, like, it happens. Certain players do this. A high-profile example would be Chris Jones, the guy that just got $160 million in total, 90-something, $100 million guaranteed, whatever, with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a pretty good player, and he's notorious for taking entire halves off. Like, he'll just not show up until the third quarter for some games. I guess he's just another Vic Beasley too, right? Because that's what folks were saying was, oh, Chase Young, glad we had dodged that bullet. Just another Vic Beasley, just going to be a first ballot CTC guy, cash that check, and I'm trying to cash checks and get out of here. I'm not trying to play football before that for all these things. I'm not saying that Chase Young is Chris Jones. It's not a comparison. If you thought that's what it was, you're mistaken. What it is saying what matters most. Do the plays you take off matter, or do the plays that you're trying matter? Because if the plays that you're trying matter, I'm here to tell you, Chase Young had more pressures last year than any one Titans player did. They could use that guy. They can't anymore, but they could have used that guy. And so I know our buddy Mike Herndon was on this point as well. He said that I hope everyone pro clutching over Chase Young, taking a few plays off while producing more pressures than any Titans player did last year, really enjoys watching Rashad Weaver bust his ass for 4 sacks and 26 pressures all year long. Now, I'm sorry to Rashad Weaver who caught a stray there, but the point is pretty obvious that you need guys that can produce. And I want to address this idea that, well, it's a waste of money, spend it elsewhere. Where? Have you seen the free agency market today? Like when folks are like, well, you got to be patient. Free agency is 10 days old. There are other fish in the sea. Brother, no, there aren't. The sea is drying up. The lake is drying up. There are no more fish to be had. The Titans have something in the ballpark of $45 million of free agency money to spend. And we had our buddy, former NFL GM, Executive of the Year, Randy Mueller, on our show just about a month ago, I think. He was talking about how he, with the Titans having $75 million of cap space to spend this year, he would be surprised and went as far as to say he'd be kind of disappointed if they spent more than like half of it. And that point was well taken. And I'm not disputing that point here. What I'm here to give is more context, right? What he was saying there in general was that you don't want to spend all that money on big multi-year contracts for free agents. That is generally a very bad idea. It's true. Giving out all in 1 year, a bunch of 2, 3, 4, 5 year deals at 60, 90, $120 million in total is a bad idea. It typically comes back to bite you and to put you in cap hell, and you tend to want to kick the can down the road and all these things that you shouldn't be doing. That general maxim, that general idea he's not talking about 1 year deals, right? Because JT, if the Titans sign Jim Bob Cooter that's actually a real person, dadgummit. He's my go-to fake name when I talk to people that aren't in the NFL because it sounds fake. He's a real person. When they sign Jimmy John to that's a restaurant, not a person, to a contract for 1 year, $9 million to be a starting inside linebacker, that's not them wasting money, because it is money that otherwise would be sitting in their bank this year, turned into a physical manifestation of a person playing football for you and adding value to your team this year. And how it impacts you after this year is over is that it doesn't. As long as you don't re-sign them or add void years or do some weird cap manipulation, you got to spend the money somewhere. And if you're going to spend it on starting, just replacement level, regular old starting caliber play for 1 year on a prove it deal that's fully guaranteed or, incentive laden, whatever it is, but it's all contained in 1 year, there is no downside. And so folks talk to me about like, well, I'd rather them save the money. Why? For other players. Who? Well, just, you don't want to spend it foolishly and get yourself in trouble in the future. It's a 1 year deal. Like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough for a guy like that, Chase Young, who obviously I think the neck injury is a lot more concern than people gave it at the time. But you're right. I mean, it's obvious that this team still needs a lot on the defensive side of the ball while also looking towards the future. So yeah, with that money, of course, they do have a lot of cap space to put towards the future there with that 46 and change left over. However, I mean, you still need people to play for your football team this season. So giving guys maybe a 1 year, $10 million deal or a 1 year, $13 million deal, that's $23 million you're going to get back in the cap next year, right?
Right.
It's going to come back next year.
Can I elaborate on that one thing? Because you bring up a point there where there are teams where you think that this kind of behavior, I would say this kind of behavior is foolish because they're spending money just to spend money, and they already have starting caliber play, and they go off and they try to spend it on a like an aging veteran
You
who's
coach Houston Texans right now.
who was a star at one point, and you're just hoping that they've still got a little bit of gas left in the tank, and you give them a 1-year, $15 million contract to replace a starter. Like you're probably just throwing money around, and you may be messing up potential development of a guy that was going to be in that starting role and was a starting caliber player. That's different from what the Titans are, because as we established, the Titans don't have starters in those roles, and they don't have young developmental players that are promising potential future starters they need to let get reps. They don't exist, right? Like they may after the draft, they'll have some of those guys for sure. But right now, they're not out there. And so it makes you wonder what exactly is your plan? Because right now, the plan is rolling out guys that don't have a future as a starter, and allowing 50 points a game.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up a good question. And Kenneth in here has this point here saying, I'm wondering if this plan makes them even more likely to be a trade back candidate.
Kenneth, I hope so.
They simply need more players. And I
hope
think
so.
that is where this is going right now, with you seeing maybe 4 quarterbacks go in the top 5 picks. There's going to be some good value on the board, and a lot of good players are still going to continue to fall. So I think that it's becoming more of a reality every day.
I love Kenneth brings up this point that they need more bodies, like just not good players, not players at a certain, like they just need numbers.
They can go get more bodies today by paying them.
Right. This legion of men is depleted. It is simply a numbers problem. And so I don't know if you've seen this, JT, on social media. I've seen a lot of I think Rand kind of hung it up in free agency. I think they're done after the Calvin Ridley signing. I know they're not. Do you know why? Because they don't have enough players to have a camp. They don't have a camp. They got to sign guys. So I promise they're not done in free agency. They're not close to done in free agency. Are they going to be these big name players you're oohing and on at? Probably not, because they're all gone. To my earlier point that you got to get what you're getting while the getting's good, right? Speaking of you're getting while the getting's good, can we talk about how I think last year's DeAndre Hopkins situation has set a bit of a terrible precedent for fans in the way that they perceive when you can get quality players in free agency? Because this is another thing that folks are throwing back at me that I think is really misguided. Last year, the Titans signed DeAndre Hopkins. What was it, like July 4th or something? Early
Close
July.
Yep.
And so that was a big ad for them, a very quality player that they had put on their roster right before training camp, essentially. And a lot of folks seem to be leaning into that. As Charlie is here, there will be some big cuts. I'm afraid I'm about to put you down, Charlie, because I think you're mistaken on this, genuinely. And I'm not trying to dunk on you or anything. And you are not alone in thinking this, but I think folks need to realize the reality of the situation. There is not a DeAndre Hopkins caliber player available in June and July every year. In fact, most years there aren't. And you can say, well, at this point last year, we didn't know DeAndre Hopkins would be available because he was still an Arizona Cardinal. No, if you were paying attention, it was obvious in January that DeAndre Hopkins was going to be a cut candidate. He was on the trade block forever. Nobody bit for weeks and then months. He was obviously getting cut because the Cardinals weren't going to keep him and pay him what they were paying him. And so when he got cut, anyone paying attention realized that it was obvious and saw it coming. Oh, they finally cut him. Okay, cool. He's available now. That you were able to bake that in long before the draft ever happened. In general, it's very stupid to wait in free agency to the summer for summer cuts. Here's once again, our buddy Zach put this list together, and I thank him for it because it's tough. It's a tough list. You say that there are going to be big cuts in June. Just watch. Here's what we watched last year. Here's what we just watched last year. Every player released or waived in June or July in 2023 on defense, which is where the Titans are going to be looking this year, right? Here's the list. Tack McKinley, Will Parks, Trayvon Mullen, Cam Dantzler, Brandon Bryant, Latrell Bumpus, Justice Tavai, Forrest Merrill, Jamal Peters, Kyler McMichael, Jalen Dalton, twice apparently, Tay Hayes, Josh Thomas, Vernon Scott, Anthony Witherstone, Colin Duncan, Scott Nelson, Rashad Berry, Isaiah Rogers, Miles Dorn, Perrion Winfrey, John Reed, Nick Bolton, not Nick Bolton, much better player, Nick Thurman, Isaiah Brown, Leonard Johnson, Trenton Thompson, James Campbell, Isaiah Dunn, Alton Robinson, Curtis Brooks, Jonah Tavai, Xavier Henderson, Jonathan Garvin, Montre Braswell, Cole Coleman, Dylan Mabin, Dorian Etheridge, Ellerson Smith, Bravion Roy, and Montrell Osling III. Now, would you believe it if I told you that half of those names are made up, like Key and Peele style? Like Osmertag, Buttshank, and AJ RJ backslash and fourth the fifth is in there.
Former first round legend Tack McKinley's on that list. So, I mean, at least you have a couple things going for you, right?
So that list demonstrates the reality of the fact you can't wait until the summer. Big names don't get cut. Starting caliber players don't get cut. These were all guys that were cut in the summer for a reason. They are not players you want on your team in a prominent role. And so take the DeAndre Hopkins situation out of your mind, set it aside, realize that in reality, if you're banking on the summer, you're going to have big problems with that position.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. A couple comments here bring up a guy who could fit that mold, but I think is still highly unlikely. Chef Rand says, what about Hassan Reddick? And Kenneth saying, I'm waiting for Howie Roseman to simply fold, and Reddick is simply released for no reason. Kind of like what the Cardinals did. However, I think Howie Roseman is a bit smarter than the Cardinals organization, so I don't know if that would happen. But you are right that it feels like it's going to come in a lot of the draft this year. And I think this is something that I've talked about a lot, is the fact that I really do feel like we could see a reverse trend here where you see those first two picks possibly be a trade back and take a tackle and then maybe a wide receiver in round 2. And then rounds 3 through 7, those next 7 or 8 picks that they get from the trade back, all defense, because of how deep this class is. And I think I
think folks forget that last year Rand Carthon went 6 for 6 on offensive picks.
We could fully reverse that after
that
the second
streak
round.
Is coming to an end. It's 1,000% coming to an end.
It has to eventually, right? Yeah. You would think with current situation, and I think that is their plan right now, is to load up in the back half of the draft, because as Rand has told us time and time again, that's his bread and butter. And I think that is an interesting way to look at it, that he's going to load up on the draft and hopefully get 2 or 3 of these guys to really hit and produce early and often.
So as for Hassan Reddick, which is a fair point brought up by Chef Rand and Kenneth, I'm not going to pretend I have a super finger on the pulse of that situation. I'm familiar with it. It's a maybe, maybe not kind of deal. That whole saga of whether they'll keep him or not, still up in the air. From folks that I trust that keep an eye on the Eagles, Ben Solak and Shul Kapadia both work at The Ringer. Both of them are former Philly beat writer folks. And so they do a Philly show, even though they're national folks at this point. They are tuned into that market. From listening to them tangentially, it sounds like they are pretty confident he's going to stick around. And it doesn't make much sense to them, if folks in the know, for the Eagles to move off for no reason and just cut him. So I kind of am not banking on that. But if it were to happen, my second point is that, cool. So you had one surprise, starting caliber, very old, risky, but starting caliber. I say very old. Sorry, Hassan. Older, risky, starting caliber player available to you. What about the other 9 holes they have? Because they have a lot. It's not like they're banking on one player at one position. No, they're banking on a lot of things on defense right now, it seems, unless they have some names that they're going to pull out of a hat, because you look up and down the available folks and they just aren't there. And so that takes us to what Rand Carthon's next move may be. I do think it's fair to say that after the signing of Calvin Ridley, the Titans are, again, not done by any means in free agency, but are moving on from phase 2 to phase 3, or maybe just straight to phase 4 of free agency, where it's the value adds, the bargain bin guys, the prove it deals, the $1, $2, $3, $4 million contracts for guys that you think might have some real upside, but you're not really. You're just taking a flyer on them. And so, oh my goodness, I forgot about this. Okay, kind of changing the subject a little bit. A proposed trade that's been thrown around the Nashville media today. And Karsten Ferguson brought this to my attention on Twitter @TrueHype. So thank you, Karsten. He says that our buddy here at 440 Sports, Braden Gall's mentor, who of course is Jared Stillman, don't ever forget that, said something today that he wanted to get our thoughts on. And I checked his radio show right before we got on. He was talking about it right then. He says that if Minnesota were to offer the Titans number 11 and number 23 overall, 2 first-round picks for the 7th overall pick, that he would say no, because the Titans have to stay at their position. If Joe Alt, he said no if Joe Alt is there, because Joe Alt is just that good. Carson said he personally disagrees with this thought and wanted to get our opinions on it. Let me give you my opinion on it. That's crazy. That's insane. And it's perfect coming from Jared Stillman. Once again, making our jobs very easy, pointing out a little microcosm of what the Jared Stillman experience is. There it is. Enjoy. It demonstrates 2 things, right? One, it demonstrates that you don't have a very good understanding. I'll say you just don't have any understanding of the draft beyond the first guy in the offensive line class. Like, your offensive line class knowledge for the 2024 NFL class is like Joe Alt. I bet he's heard of Ola Fashanu. And then I doubt he can tell you anything about the next couple of guys who we've talked about at length already. We're going to go in even deeper on in the coming weeks, who are all going to be first-round picks in Troy Fatanu, in Talise Fuaga, in J.C. Latham, in Marvin Mims, Amarius Mims, rather. Those are also going to be first-round tackle talents. And if you were to move from 7 back to 11, the difference in like Joe Alt is very good. Do not get it twisted. He is tackle 1 in this class. He's very good. I'm very confident he's going to be a good player. He is not that good. He's not even close to that good to justify giving up 2 first-round picks to move back. And that brings up the other thing that it demonstrates for a guy like Jared Stillman. If you say this kind of thing, it demonstrates that you don't know how the draft works, just generally. First of all, trade value. The idea that again, what's silliest about all of this, JT, is that it's a trade that would never happen. The Vikings are not offering those 2 first-round picks straight up for number 7. But if they were, in this fantasy world we're living in, the Titans on any trade chart would be getting like 500 points of value, which is that's equivalent. That's equivalent to like what, a mid-second round pick.
I mean, it's made up for JJ McCarthy, baby. That is JJ McCarthy's value. He's just
no amount of excess value
just that good, man.
Can overcome the quality of the 4th quarterback in this class. But also, I don't think you understand. Actually, I know if you believe this, you don't understand that the draft, if anything, if the draft has ever taught us anything from historical reference, how things have gone in the draft over decades, is that you should never be this confident in anything, in any one player. Never. Maybe the occasional quarterback, and that's kind of it. If you are that confident in your evaluation between the number 1 guy at a position versus the number 2 and 3 guy at their position, then you are fooling yourself. You're being really dumb, because it's just not that simple. And so that's crazy. And I just wanted to put that out there because it's something that folks are talking about today. And I don't want people getting deluded into thinking, 1, that that's a thing that's maybe going to happen. It's not. And 2, that it's a thing that you would even for a moment think, well, maybe you do stick with 7. No, you don't.
Yeah, I mean, it is
nothing to add
quite
there.
Interesting. I mean, no, what else would I add there? I mean, that is it's so cut and dry usually that that on those type of things, that just looking at it from a value though, it is Stoney just says, give me 3 red chips and 3 chance to hit over 1 blue chip guy who you think is hit because you think he's a can't miss prospect. There are so many can't miss prospects out there who
putting your 1 blue chip down on the table, and then the dealer has an ace 10, and it's done. It's over.
I think it does bring up a good conversation and transition topic into if they do in fact trade back and get some more picks. Does that make a road to getting a guy like L'Jarius Sneed more possible? And could that be kind of what they're targeting right now with the lack of movement on the secondary market here for this team?
Sure. So like we've pretty much alluded to the entire show, the Titans' defensive strategy in terms of roster building right now has seemingly been a lot of patience for some reason, and then a bunch of just shoulder shrugs and question marks. Like we don't really know what's going on. And so L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback who has been franchise tagged by the Chiefs, is a trade candidate. Apparently the Colts have been in on him at one point. Apparently the Lions were in on him at one point, based on who you listen to reporting wise. Diana Rossini with The Athletic talked on the Athletic Football Show podcast yesterday or in the past 48 hours about how she had, I mean, the Titans were so in at one point that she had the tweet up and ready to post, thinking the deal would get done. And then ultimately the deal fell through. Now, Paul Kaharski, who we've mentioned many times, friend of the show, the most well-connected traditional reporter in town, trust what he has to say pretty much across the board when it comes to sourcing. And he said on March 15th, which was 4 days ago, that the Titans are not in on L'Jarius Sneed as of right now. So what sounds like, and we also heard apparently on Kansas City Talk Radio today, there was some reporting that the Titans were in at one point. The roadblock was not the deal in place with the Chiefs, which apparently was going to be a trade that was like a 2025 third round pick. And then the Chiefs would obviously be getting some comp pick formula at, some serious bonus added in there for losing a guy like Sneed. It was in Sneed accepting the new deal that you would have to sign him to if you were to trade for him. The Titans offered something in the range of 4 years, $80 million, so a $20 million per year deal. Sneed's camp wants more. I think he wants to not just reset the cornerback market, but really, really reset the cornerback market and get up to like $22, $23 million a year. Now, that's all reporting, and that could not be true. That's what the tea leaves are saying right now. I would say, JT, as to your original question, now that we've got all the facts on the ground, I have no problem with them if they trade back going after L'Jarius Sneed. I think that it would be a smart move. I think that paying him, again, they have money to spend it on a blue chip guy like Sneed. He absolutely is worth that money. Even though it's an overpay, being worth the money, there's no amount of money you can spend if they're that player, then it doesn't matter, right? If he's the guy that he's been, it doesn't matter if you spend 20, 21, 22, $23 million. Is it an overpay? Yes, but the value you get on the back end can make the overpay not worth it, or not important. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So general to ask your question, I don't have an issue with it at all. Or are you asking because you would?
No, I'm just asking, is that the direction you think they would go there because of how well they've been connected so far? Is trading back in this first round and getting maybe an extra third, make it seem like that's more of a clear path. And that's why we're waiting right now. Like when we come to draft day and we see them trade back, and then if that inevitably happens, then we could say and look back on episodes like this and say that was their plan all along.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that would be like, again, I am not being super critical for no reason of the Titans, saying they don't have it figured out on defense, acting like it's like the picture of their offseason is completed. I know it is not. I'm just simply questioning, you're running out of options. What's next? And if that was what ended up being next, then cool, right? Like a mission accomplished in that regard. All right. Let's get to the last segment for today. We've got the news with producer JT, and boy, has there been a lot of it around the league. So let's get into all of the things that we've learned in the past 5 days. JT?
Yeah, let's start with where the Titans are currently at in the cap realm here. Their current cap space per Sack Lines over at Football and Other F Words is about $46 million in $4,000, 46.4. Still pending the Nick Folk and Sadiq Charles contracts there, but even with those kind of accounted for, I would still expect them to most likely still be above $40 million when all things are said and done. So still one of the teams that has the most capital to spend, as we just talked about. And then, of course, we talked about the signing of today, Sebastian Joseph Day, coming from the Los Angeles Chargers. We talked about him and how he may not be the guy, but playing against or next to Jeffrey Simmons could boost a lot to his game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that it is a good signing, a rotational piece. They needed to add to their D-line, and they did, which is very good. Coming off a career year, 3 sacks and 11 pressures. Is he an every down starter? I don't know about that, but is he a very nice rotational piece? Absolutely. Very similar to how I view Arden Key.
Yeah, the Titans also met with a couple of options on the offensive line here. One that they seem to have the most interest in is the Saints free agent guard Andres Pete, who has started 102 games in New Orleans since 2015. No deal has happened with him, but something to maybe keep an eye on as he has not signed a deal yet. And then looking at a couple of other guys that they plan to meet with, we talked about Marcus May potentially coming in for a visit. And then another one today, former Buffalo Bills, Tre'Davious White, is also planning to meet with the team and the front office. So, I mean, things could look wildly different in a couple of days if the Titans were to sign Marcus May and Tre'Davious White, two guys who, one, I think is a plus starter and can still start at the league. And then you could look at maybe Tre'Davious White as that prove it deal, like buy low candidate that we've talked about.
Right. Yeah. Trey, I'm very much on, not because he's not a good player, but because he's been so injured. Only played 10 games in his past 2 years, I believe. Yeah, it's tough. I think he's 29 now. He's getting old. He's accumulating injuries. If you bring him onto the team, that's fine. I don't have an issue with it, but you can't be banking on him to be your starter throughout the entire season, and you can't be banking on him being the reason why you don't need to draft a cornerback as well. You still absolutely would.
Let's talk about a guy that we were just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, who finally gets cut and released from the team, Andre Dillard. We thought after the combine, with a couple of comments, that he may find his way to stick around on this team, but as we find out and as we confirm, Bill Callahan is not a miracle worker, and I think the Titans realize that. So Andre Dillard will be cut, and he is currently not on the team. Now, would they bring them back on another deal like that? Probably not, but it is an option, I guess.
Happy second annual Dennis Daly Day to everyone
Correct.
that celebrates, right?
And then the Titans are already bringing in prospects for the top 30 visits. Two guys on this list that we're both big fans of. Two cornerbacks here, Chris Abrams-Drain from Missouri. And
are you a big Chris Abrams-Drain guy? Because I'm not. I don't know. I
thought you were.
No, I mean, I'm happy.
You were at the combine.
I found him fascinating, and I've soured on him since.
All righty then. Well, another guy that I am in fact high on, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. from Louisville.
I love Jarvis Brownlee Jr.
I think the Titans could look to target in the 4th round there, so they're bringing him in. And then a defensive lineman, McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M, are the 3 guys that they've already brought in for top 30 visits.
Yeah, we've talked about Brownlee and Abrams-Drain in the past, so go back and listen to the Senior Bowl episodes if you want to hear about them. McKinley Jackson, team captain, day 3 option for the Titans. And given the state of their defensive line, would not be shocked at all if he's the kind of guy that they're looking to address that position of need with. In general, we'll be tracking these top 30 visits because it gives you a good glimpse into how the Titans are looking at this draft class in terms of positions, in terms of where, in their picks that they have, like where in the series of the draft they're thinking about taking different positions. Looking at a bunch of defensive linemen that are projected to be day 3 guys, you'd imagine that's where they're going to draft defensive linemen. But if they're starting to bring it in Devondre Sweat and folks that are going to go on day 1, day 2, suddenly that changes the math.
And then we can move on to maybe a Titans adjacent topic here. Mike Vrabel finds himself a job with the Cleveland Browns as they are hiring former Titans head coach Mike Vrabel as a coaching and personnel consultant per Field Yates. Vrabel now returns to Ohio, where he was a standout Ohio State linebacker. So it sounds like Mike Vrabel was busy on that one day that he was at the combine.
Say, folks were like, he was actually with the team at the combine. JT, you can report firsthand that he was in and out of Indianapolis in 24 hours. He was
in a flash. He was there wearing his Dan Flash's best, wearing a very interesting shirt in the bar that we were in, and got to exchange pleasantries. But yes, he I guess went in there found a job and got the hell out of there, I guess.
Good for him. Good for him.
We can talk about some quarterbacks who are on the move, and 2 of them that I think have been the biggest topics this entire week have been Russell Wilson and Justin Fields find their way to Pittsburgh. Who would have thought this happened as they sign Russell Wilson
sharping in the bargain bin, the Pittsburgh Steelers. How about that?
Trade just for Justin Fields for, I believe, a 2026 or 2025 6th-round pick, one of the 2.
I think it's a 2025. It's a conditional 4th.
Yes, it's a conditional 4th if he is playing.
6
at worst. So that does mean Kenny Pickett gets traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. At least he didn't have to go too far, but it just kind of puts into perspective how much the 2022 quarterback class missed.
Well, and the 2021. I mean, between those two classes, you've got one starter, Trevor Lawrence. That's it, right? Because go down the list. You got Zach Wilson, going to be traded soon, I'd imagine.
Yep. Mac Jones
traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Justin Fields
just traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And then you look at the 2022 class.
Yep.
With Kenny Pickett.
20th overall. Kenny Pickett traded. 74th overall. Desmond Ridder traded. 86th overall. Malik Willis.
still on the
still on the Titans.
Two-tone blue.
Still in for now. 94th overall. Matt Corral cut twice now with the UFL. I think they're like the Birmingham Stallions or something. 137th overall. Bailey Zappi cut and then re-signed. He really, let's be honest, Zappi's only in the league. He's a Mac Jones merchant. That's why he's still around. He got to constantly have to come in for Mac Jones because Mac Jones got benched. And then Sam Howell, 144th overall, traded. Now, technically, you also then had Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, pick number, whatever, 300, whatever it is. Yep. So I guess two hits in the two classes. Clap it up for what was a horrendous run of quarterbacks. And thankfully, we're out of that desert right now. Might get ready to learn 2021 and 2022 draft classes when we get to the 2025 draft class, because that quarterback class is looking a lot closer to those than it is looking to this year's.
It is. And then two more things in the AFC South here. First, the Texans are reportedly getting new jerseys here, and they are interesting ones.
They sure are jerseys.
They are, as we can take a look at them here.
Here they are.
I
told you, JT, pull a picture of the jerseys. And then you went and you found the worst. Okay, you found the better one. Okay, now I appreciate you finding the worst one because it's funnier. What are your, I mean, it's very.
I think the shoulder pads are interesting. They look more like wings to me than like the horns. You know. Well, I guess in this one you can kind of see it better.
Horns, but it's like two bowls on either side of the person because the horns aren't. You know what I mean? Like they're not coming off of the person. They're.
The rest of the jersey is fine though. I have no complaints.
Here's my general take on this jersey. Okay. I think it is painfully okay.
It kind of looks like the Atlanta Falcons a little bit too much.
A little bit. It's aggressively average is my take on this jersey. Is it a massive change? No. My favorite part of it might be I think the font's pretty cool for the number. It's a nice font. It's interesting. Got the little horns coming off of there. That's whatever. But yeah, I've seen better jersey rebrands personally.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
From a certain team?
Any team, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then finally here.
You know what? The Titans really should if the Titans would just give them back their jerseys, then we wouldn't have this issue.
Oh, that's where you're going. Okay.
It's really the Titans' fault if you think about it. Yep.
Yep. All right. And then finally, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's just talk about a potential trade that could have gone down here, as there was a report that the 49ers asked the Jaguars for the number 17 pick plus a player in exchange for Brandon Ayuk, and they turned that down.
They said no.
They did.
Why?
Hey man, Gabe Davis.
By the way, the player we found out who the player was. Did you hear this part? Zay Jones. Zay Jones was the player in question.
Really? So
the Niners
number
wanted
17
their first
in Zay Jones for Brandon Ayuk,
a top 10 receiver in the NFL who is only. Alexa, how old is Brandon Ayuk?
He's got to be 26. I think he's around there.
25 years old.
All right.
Yeah. That's a choice by the Jacksonville Jaguars. One that I think is crazy. Listen, they've had I think pretty dreadful free agency so far. Their offseason has been very weird, letting Calvin Ridley go, bungling that, giving a bunch of money to Gabriel Davis.
That's it.
What else have they done?
I mean, they re-signed Ezra Cleveland. They signed Mitch Morse. So they're taking in a couple of Bills veterans, maybe to build that culture, I guess. Not a lot of moves on defense, though. Crazy enough. Travis Gibson today.
Here's what it is. They're operating like a team that is like going 12 or 12-4 or 12-5, 13-4 every year. They're winning their division outright. They only need a couple of tweaks. They're just trying to run it back. That's not what they are, man. They're a team that's scratching and clawing to get to 10 wins. In fact, I think the last 2 years they haven't gotten 10 wins, right? They've been like 9-8.
No. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know what they're doing, not trying to take that leap with Trevor Lawrence, but here they are not taking it. So I don't know. And this is the kind of move where if they had made that move, that they bungled the Calvin Ridley thing, they gave money to Gabe Davis, all these things, but hey, traded for a top 10 receiver in the league. You got Brandon Ayuk in the door. Could have saved the offseason. And they said, we're a big Zay Jones group here. We love Zay Jones. We love our first round pick. We'll stick. We're good. We're fine. Thanks.
And that's going to do it for our news segment today.
All right. I'm mercifully getting out of this show. If you can't tell, I've been fighting for my freaking life the entire show. I knew I had a cough. I did not think this would be a thing today. I've just been at home working, not talking. So I've been like a little coughing on the side, but it's not been a big deal. And the second I start trying to talk and breathe, I realize very quickly, oh no, I can't do that. So thank you genuinely to anybody that suffered through this with me. And big thank you to JT for taking over more of this show than I know he anticipated having to take over, and doing a valiant job with it. So thanks to all involved. I'm going to go to the doctor or something. I don't know. I'm going to go fix myself. And by Thursday, when we're back here on this feed, Thursday afternoon, same time, same place, we will be talking about more news, probably more draft specific talk. JT, I know you and I starting to rear up our detailed draft analysis time. It's about time for
draft 1.0.
That I was about to say, that is in the next 2 weeks. I'd imagine that's coming out. We're going to do mock draft 1, 2, and 3.0 on this show, at least, maybe more. We'll see. Digging into some actual predictions, first round picks, and all these things. And then our top 10 lists at each position, really giving you, in our opinion, the very best educational, entertaining insight into the best players at each position, not just what the Titans need in this draft class, of any of the Nashville media market shows. We pride ourselves in going deep on those guys, and that's what we're going to do. So if you want to learn about this draft class, and I recommend you do because it's very fascinating and it will help inform you on how the Titans are going to address their key needs, check out our top 10 series on each and every position group, starting again in the next couple of weeks. Big, exciting time with the draft coming up. At some point in the next couple of weeks, we will, by the way, one last thing, JT, we'll be going back from 2 shows a week to 3 shows a week as we start to ramp up as we get closer to the draft. So, and then by the time of the draft, we might be doing a show every week. We'll see. That's how it got. I went back and tracked it last year. The last week, or really 2 weeks leading up to the draft, we did 9 shows in 10 business days. So that's probably going to happen again, if we're being honest. And so looking forward to that, and looking forward to having you all along with us for the ride, in the comment section, participating, all these things, supporting us. We appreciate you guys being here with us until Thursday. For producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you then.